What's up, guys? Ted from Immersion here, and it's Tuesday, so that means another top 10 video. This week, we're switching it up from tabletop, and I'm going back to video games, so it's my top 10 original Nintendo games. Number 10, Tetris. I don't think I really need to explain why Tetris is on this list. Tetris is great, and Tetris on the NES was my first exposure to it. So, Tetris is number 10. Before I get into number 9, I guess I should explain, this top 10 is my personal top 10, and I'm basing these all off of games that I played growing up. While yes, I realize that there are a ton of other games that should be on this list that are excellent original Nintendo games, I'll mention them at the end as honorable mentions, but these are games that were my top 10 and also have a huge nostalgia for me, especially because I played them growing up. So, number 9 is a game called Air Fortress. I did a little research on it after the fact just recently, and it seems like a fair amount of people know of this game, but it's sort of more rare than you would expect. It was a really cool game that I rented from a local video store way back in the day, and it started off with, like, it had ship levels that was sort of Gradius-like, a side-scrolling, in-space, shooting game. And then when you actually landed your ship, it kind of took on a more Metroid theme. And actually the main character, who I can't remember his name, I want to say it's like Kevin or some like weird name, but he almost looked like Samus. He was orange and red. I think he even had a green mask, and it had, like, you could get rocket packs, and it had a lot of backtracking, sort of a Metroid style game. And I haven't played this game in years. In fact, in the 7th grade, I think I sold all my original Nintendo games to my friend Stu for $15. So Stu Blackwell, if you're listening to this and you still have my copy of Air Fortress, I would love to buy it back from you. So I would recommend checking out Air Fortress. You could probably get it on an emulator pretty easily, but go check it out and let me know what you think. Number 8, Bayou Billy. Aside from having one of the funniest commercials that I'd ever seen for original Nintendo game, the Bayou Billy himself, this is actually the first video game that I ever beat. I actually, growing up, my grandmother one Christmas bought me 2 VHS tapes that were VHS strategy guide tapes that she thought were actual video games. Unfortunately, they weren't. They were strategy guides, and each tape had 4 games on them. And what was even more frustrating for me is those 8 games between the 2 tapes were 8 games that I didn't have. So I could see how to play them and beat them. And for whatever reason, as a kid, I loved watching these tapes to learn about how to beat Bayou Billy, Blades of Steel, the hockey game, Track and Field 2, Ninja Gaiden, Wrath of the Black Mana, Castlevania, Mega Man 2, and there was another one, I can't remember what it was. But yeah, I used to love watching these videos. River City Ransom was the other one. And yeah, I had watched this video so many times that Sean, who you've seen on the channel, he had Bayou Billy growing up, and I remembered the entire strategy from watching that tape so much, so we just sat down one time, and the 2 of us together just beat Bayou Billy outright. So it holds a special place for me as the first video game that I ever beat. And it was also a fun time because it was me and Sean alternating levels and stuff like that, and all that useless video knowledge I had came in handy. Number 7, Super Mario Brothers. Again, this is sort of like Tetris. I don't need to explain why this is on this list. This was the first video game that I ever played. Aside from Space... Actually, I did play Space Invaders on my parents' old Atari. So I guess this is the second video game I ever played. But one that obviously the music, the visual style, and there's a reason that Mario's still here today and is as popular as he is, and this is the reason why. Number 6 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. This, if you haven't played it, I don't know what you're doing, but go play it. It was also, a few years ago, they released an updated version of it when TMNT released in 2004, the movie. They released a version on the Xbox Live Arcade, which I don't believe is downloadable anymore. But this was a port of the very classic, very popular arcade cabinet that was 4 players. This was obviously only 2 players because it was on the original Nintendo. But growing up, the only Ninja Turtle game that I had was the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game. And if you don't know what that game is about, you can check the Angry Video Game Nerd review. I'll put the video link right here, but check that to see how frustrating the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles video game was. So that's all I had growing up. And Sean, who I mentioned before, he had this game, and I tell you, every time I used to go over his house, I remember plugging in the Game Genie and just playing this game straight through. And I just, again, just a nostalgia holds a huge nostalgia factor for me, and takes me right back to being 5 years old again, going over to my friend's house to play video games. Number 5 is the original Legend of Zelda game. This was a game that I didn't own growing up, but it was a game that I rented from that same local video store I rented Air Fortress from. And I fell in love with this game. I loved this game a lot at the time, but my small child mind had a hard time just understanding everything that was going on, because the way the original Zelda worked is if you didn't know where you were going or didn't know what you were looking for, you could just get lost. So I remember like pretending to be Link and dressing up and wanting to have like a sword and a shield, and even the stupid blue candle thing. Like I wanted to have that as like a prop when I was playing with my friends and stuff. And that really kind of set my love for the Legend of Zelda. And well, I mean, Ocarina of Time was the one that really brought it to the forefront for me, because it was the first one that I would say I really got really into, and that was my favorite game in existence. But it all started with this Legend of Zelda game. The reason it's number 5 on this list and not number 1 is just that. Growing up, there were games that I enjoyed a lot more, and I never owned Zelda, but I played it and I liked it a lot, and it deserves to be on this list. Number 4 is Mega Man 2. Mega Man 2, again, as I mentioned before, was one of those games that I had watched the strategy for countless times on that old VHS strategy guide. And it was another, and growing up, Stu Blackwell, who I mentioned before, who I sold all my games to, him and I were huge Mega Man nerds, and we used to play Mega Man 2, 3, and then all the way up through X2, 1, 2, and 3, that were still on the Super Nintendo. And Mega Man 2, just the one that really sticks out to me. I rented, 4 and 5 back in the day, but 2 is the one that stuck with me. I liked the enemies, the music was amazing. And again, it probably has something to do with the fact that I watched a strategy to tell me exactly how to beat Mega Man 2, what order to fight the Robot Masters in, what powers to use where, and all that. And to this day, it's still one of those games that I love, and I still remember little tidbits like the quirky announcer voice for this game. So that's why it's on this list. Number 3, surprise, another one on that list. It's Castlevania. Now I recognize and I wholeheartedly believe, and I'm right there with you guys, Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse is a way better game than the original Castlevania game. Don't even get me started on Simon's Quest. But Castlevania is, I don't know, the Castlevania series is a series that I love. And I mean, as weird as it is, I love Castlevania 64 as well. I know it's a weird game and it sucks compared to the wondrous gem that is Symphony of the Night that came out around the same time. But it all started for me with this Castlevania, the first one. And maybe I fabricated this memory, but I could have sworn I remember being in like a Denny's with my parents having breakfast one time on some family trip. And apparently there's a cricket in here. But anyway, I remember being on this trip and like waiting for everybody to like pay and check out. And like I had a couple of quarters and I put them in like what I felt was like a top-down arcade cabinet. And I could have sworn I remember playing the original Castlevania game at this Denny's. Like I said, I don't know if that was even a thing, if Castlevania was ever available in Denny's in any sort of weird arcade cabinet, or maybe it was some, spoof slash, knockoff of it. But that started it, and I just remember really loving the fact that the whip was a weapon, because that was really original. And then, my love for that style of stuff, Indiana Jones kind of made that more prominent too. But, Castlevania is still one of my favorite game series. I really like the Lord of Shadows stuff that's out now, but again, it still goes back to the original Castlevania for original Nintendo. Number 2 is Duck Hunt. This was also one of the only games that I was ever... my family were not big video gamers. I mentioned that they did have an Atari, but I feel like that was more of a formality than anything. But my family didn't really play video games. They still don't play video games, my mom and my dad. But I tell you what, Duck Hunt was a game that I've never seen... I had never seen adults in my family get more competitive over another game like Duck Hunt. because I come from a big outdoorsy family, and the hunters, fishers, that kind of fishermen and all that kind of stuff. So this was a game that really resonated with the whole family. They had the gun and sitting further back, and who could beat who and who could go longer and who could actually hit the clay pigeons on that one, because that game, nobody ever played that. But yeah, I remember plenty of like pizza Friday nights with my uncle and my aunt and cousin, and like just duck hunt. And I wish that my old Nintendo would work on one of these style TVs so I could play duck hunt. I have to actually just go out and get a CRT TV so I can play classic duck hunt, or get an updated version on the virtual console that uses the Wiimote would be awesome. If it's not already out. I heard that was a thing a while ago, but I don't know if that ever happened. But yeah, it's just a classic game. We get the character in Smash Brothers, which was kind of random, but yeah, I love Duck Hunt. It's one of my favorite games, and it's probably also the reason that I love games like Time Crisis and the Jurassic Park games and Area 51 and all those gun games in the arcade. All stems back to my love for Duck Hunt. And finally, number 1 is Bobble. I don't know what it is about this game. Maybe it was dinosaurs and I loved dinosaurs growing up. Maybe it was Bubbles and I loved Bubbles. I don't know. But Bobble is my absolute favorite original Nintendo game. I first got exposure to this rather, because Sean, who I've mentioned several times in this video, he had Bobble growing up. And he didn't really seem to care about the game too much, but I loved playing it. And I remember, I think it was that Christmas, I got Bobble. And I remember waking up on that Christmas morning and like I got like Spider-Man pajamas and I put those on, and then I remember just like sitting in front of the TV, like I stopped opening presents and put Bobble in and just sat down and played Bobble till like I ran out of lives before I realized that I had more presents to go back and play and open. And again, I mentioned that guy Stu from back when our Mega Man days. Him and I used to spend hours trying to beat it. We got up to level 99, and we spent so long trying to beat that final boss with the electric light, or the lightning bolt bubbles that you have to knock into that boss, and we could never do it. And since then, I have been able to go into Bobble. I've been able to get the secret door in like level 99, and then go through the whole thing and beat it again. Go through and you beat it twice to get fight all the secret levels, and that way you rescue the girls, and then the girls rescue the guys, and the whole, get the true ending, which is only like a congratulations type of thing. But, yeah. And then there was a release of Bobble Plus on the Wii, which was fun because it added 4 players. And this was also a game that I was able to play with my wife, because it was a simple enough game, but also kind of goofy enough and fun enough that she would get into it, and she's not really a big gamer. I also have a really big desire to cosplay as one of the characters from Bobble. Just basically make like a onesie, a green dinosaur onesie, and then just run around a convention blowing bubbles at people. I think it'd be fun, and it'd be, goofy and a good Sunday costume. But anyway, that's the top 10. Let me give you a couple honorable mentions here. Again, I mentioned Castlevania Dracula's Curse. That's right up there. Metroid, Metal Gear, Kirby's Adventure, Ice Climber, because I'm a big fan of the Ice Climber. Kid Icarus. I have a whole bunch more over there that I don't even know which ones I have. Master Blaster, Bionic Commando. I mean, there's tons of games that I even used to have growing up. The Indiana Jones game, which Temple of Doom, which was awful. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many good games that I loved to play growing up, and it's hard to narrow this list down to only 10. I'm sure I could have made a top 50 or a top 100 if I really sat down and thought about it. But there's so many good games. But I'd love to hear from you guys and see what your top 10 original Nintendo games are. Did any of the stuff on this list match up with yours? Did I miss any big ones? Let me know. Anyway, guys, I will see you next Tuesday.